Okay. Yes. So if everyone can get fetch to get any updates that we might have made during any time, and get reset -- hard and check out the workshop 6 starter branch. Okay, I'll give you guys a minute to do that. And I'll do this. Okay. And as we've shown in the previous lecture, to connect your app to your Mongo DBMS, you need your SRV, right? So you need your SRV to be able to your database on the cloud. The SRV, even if it's your cluster, right? So the set of databases that you have on Mongo. And to do that, again, let's go to the cluster, right? Hit connect. So one cluster you have to connect to. Press on connect. So let's connect to your application and copy this code. Right? And you want to put the password. Remember, you want to put the username and the password for the web app user, or whatever user you create, right, for your own applications. And once you have the SRV, you want to paste it into the Mongo connection URL in the server.js. Right, so let's do that. So step -1 is to copy this in. Right, so if you haven't set up Mongo yet, or if you just want to use our database, just feel free to use go to this slide and copy the Mongo connection URL. This is the URL for our top of database. But do know that if you do use this, you actually won't be able to go inside Atlas to like check and see if you actually added something. Right. So if you actually see the data that you like put in on Atlas, you do have to put in your own SRV. But if you don't have set up, feel free to just use our SRV that we provide. And again, you want to put this in server.js in one line, right? So you want to put it here. So put the SRV into the Mongo connection URL. Okay, and so now if you run npm start, you should see connected to Mongo message in the terminal. So let's just put this together. 2 terminals open, and hopefully this might still works. Some people still, okay, hopefully you can hear me. So let's do npm start in one terminal, and then in the other terminal, again, I want to do npm run hot loader. So notice here, we have the connected to MongoDB. This is just like whatever we outputted when we connected to our database, right? So like here, this just means that after we connected to our database, if it's successful, we just outputted this in the server. It's not like automatically outputted whenever we connect to Mongoose. We ourselves said, hey, let's output this to let ourselves know that we connect to MongoDB when we connect, right? So we have server npm, well, this is npm run hot loader, which is the front end, and in a separate terminal, we have npm start, which starts up our server. Okay, cool. Now, hold on. Okay. So again, if you want to use our connection URL, just copy the SRV on this slide. If hopefully though you have your own SRV that you can use so that you can actually go inside Atlas to actually like look at the data. Right. Okay. So our next step then is to create our comment and story Mongoose models. Right. So we put our models in what is called the in what's called like the models folder. And so just as a recap again, MongoDB is organized. So for a database, right, we have our data organized into collections, right? So each data point, we call it a document, and documents are grouped together in what's called a collection. So documents with like similar structures, meaning like the same keys and the value types, are grouped together into collections. Right? So we have a collection of stories and a collection of comments. From the ideas point of view, like each document, like documents of the same collection kind of represent the same things, right? So you don't want like a collection to have like different things. You don't want like a collection to have like stories and comments, right? That doesn't really make sense. Right? So we have collections separately for stories and comments. And database then for a web application such as Catbook contains like several different collections, right? So like each collection is just like something that you want to store information about. And to add a model, first we're going to do the story model. So let's all go to the models directory and open up the story.js file. And remember, we want each story to have 3 fields: current ID, current name, and content. And remember this ID field. Yeah. So this ID field, like for now, we don't really need it. And since we like don't have like users or anything, and then I want each of these to be of type string. So we're going to just be creating a schema with just creating name and content. So let's do that. Let's go to the models folder under server and go to story.js. So this is where we will be storing our models and defining our schemas. So the first thing we want to do is we want to import Mongoose. What we should do is not this, but rather remember we're on the back end, so we need to use required. So we do const Mongoose equals to required, and whatever package you want to import, and in this case, Mongoose. Okay. And now that we have Mongoose imported, the next thing we want to do is to define our story schema. And to define our schema, again, the first thing we need to do is to first give our schema a name. Let's call it story schema. And to create a new schema, we first use the new keyword, and then we use mongoose dot schema, this function. And this dot schema function, mongoose dot schema function, takes in as a parameter a JavaScript object where the keys are the field names of your schema, and the values are the types of those fields. And in our case right now, we want 2 fields. We want creator name, and we want it to be of type string, and a content, which is of type string. Right, later on when we get into like authentication, we want to like have like actual IDs, but for now, like we actually don't have users yet. So yeah, we'll just like create like a dummy name. Okay, so this is how we create a schema using Mongoose, right? Again, we first define a variable name for a schema, and then we use the new keyword, and then we use mongoose.schema, the function mongoose.schema, and as input, we input a JavaScript object where the keys are the names of the fields we want the documents in the schema to have. So in this case, creator name and content. And the values of those fields are the types that we want the data for each of those fields to have, right? So this means that creator name, anything that any like data that value for a creator name must be a string. If it's a node, Mongoose will reject the document and prevent anyone from adding it to the database. right? So, and again, this one also means that content must be a string. It can't be a number, can't be an array of string, it has to be a string. Okay. So now that we have defined our schema, the next step is to create our model and also export our model so that we can actually use that model in our API, right, in our server. So to do that, we need to first export it. So let's do model export. And to create a model in Mongoose, again, we want to use the mongoose.model method. And this method takes in as input two things, right? It takes in the name of the collection that we want to make, right, for the model. And in this case, we want to have our collection be called, let's say, story. And on the second input, it takes in the schema that the collection should follow. Right? And in this case, since we already created the story schema here, we put story schema. Right, so this is like the variable name of whatever schema we want to add. And so just to recap, to create a model in Mongoose, we want to put it inside our models folder inside server. And the first thing we need to do is to import Mongoose. The second thing we need to do is to create a schema for the model. And the third thing we need to do is to just export the model and create the model by giving the model, the collection, a name, and also passing in what schema the collection should follow. In this case, whatever schema we created here, right? The story schema. Okay. And yes, we use schemas and Mongoose models to create a story model. And again, we imported Mongoose, we created a story schema, and then we created a model. We inputting the collection or like the name of the model and the schema that the collection should follow, and we export it via module.exports. And those are the three steps to creating a Mongoose model, which is just like, you can think of it as like a database management system. So like a set of functions that allow you to interact with a particular collection in your database, right? So this story model only allows us to update, or read from the stories collection in our Catbook database. It doesn't allow us to do those things to, like, say, the comments collection. It's only specific for a single collection. Right? So each collection should have its own model, its own like set of like functions that like is used to interact with it. And so now it's your turn. So using what, like the basic three steps that we did for creating a story model, let's do the same thing for the comments model, right? And in this case, to define your schema, we want the model for the comment to have three fields. We want it to have a creator name, a parent, which kind of describes the story that this comment is going into, like the story that this comment should go under, and the content of the comment. And we want all of these fields to be strings. And you want to make sure to use the module export statement at the end to export your model so that you can use it in your actual like API endpoints. Right? So I'll give you guys like a few minutes to do that. And let's just and I will go back to this slide so you guys can see what I did for story. So again, you want to kind of follow the same steps, import Mongoose, define your comment schema, and create and export the model for the comment schema. Hopefully these are also commented here. And basically for like Mongoose, you want to use like, these are like the commands that you need to use, right? Like new mongoose.schema and mongoose.model. So these are the things that you guys will be using over and over again to create your models, regardless of what like models you're creating. The only different things is probably like what you want to name your schema and what you want to name your model, and also what your schema actually is. Right? Those are probably the only things that are different. And as always, if you guys need help, please raise your hand or put anything in the question doc, or put yourself on the queue. Even if you don't know what you don't know, just put yourself on the queue and it will help. Because that's definitely happened to me before too. Okay, raise your hand if you're good. Good, thumbs up, thumbs down. Yay, okay. Okay, let's just go through this together. So the first thing we want to do again is to import Mongoose. So we do const Mongoose equals to apply Mongoose. And the next thing we need to do is to define our schema. And we do that by first giving a variable name to our schema. Let's call it comment schema. And we use the new mongoose.schema method. And inside this method, we take in a JavaScript object that specifies the fields of our schema. And in this case, we want it to have, let's see, creator name, which is a string, parent, which is a string, and content, which is a string. So why is it complaining? Question. Okay, yes, okay. And so once we have created our schema, which is like the structure that all of our documents inside of the comment collection should take, we should then create and export the model for the comments. And so to export it, we do module.export. So this is just a statement to export whatever is next. And we want to export our comment module. So let's first make the comment model by doing mongoose.model. So mongoose.model is the function that you will need every time to make a new model. And it takes in the collection and the model name, and in this case, let's call it comment. And it takes in the schema that the collection will take. So this is comment schema. Okay. So again, if you notice, this is very, very similar to the story schema, right? The only difference between the two is basically just whatever is inside the schema, right? Like different collections have different schemas, have different like structures to their data. So this is what you will probably be changing. And also what's different is just like the collection name and whatever schema you pass in. That's the only difference. Okay. Moving on. So again, this is the code you want to end up with. And so moving on, the next step is to connect our front end and back end with our newly implemented MongoDB database. And so if everyone can catch up by running get reset -- hard, get checkout workshop 6 step 1. And if you have your own SRV, do recopy it into server.js. If not, I believe our own SRV should already be in there. So now what we want to do is we want to hook up and actually use our models in our API. Like our backend should be like using the to get the data, run the front end request for the data, and also use the upload any data that the front end goes to the back end via post request and send it up to the database. Right. So we have to incorporate our database into our API handling. And the first thing we need to do is to actually import our comment model. Right. So if we look inside API.js, we've already imported these stories. Story model, but what we haven't imported yet is the comment model. Right. So in API.js, as you can see here, we already imported the story model. But what we want to do now is to import the comment model that we have just created, right? And to do that, we want to follow the same thing as the story model, where we just do cost comment equals to require. As always, when we import on the backend, we use require models / comment, right? Because this is where the comment is located. And so essentially what we want to do now is to use these models to interact with our database, right? These models, the story model and the comment model, provide like functions that allow us to interact with the database, interact with the stories collection for the story model and the comments collection for the comment model, right? And we want to do that inside of all of these API endpoints. So the get story, post story, get comment, and post comment. So, okay. And again, you want to put this inside. So the first thing we want to do is to get all of our stories inside the get / stories. Right? And what this endpoint does, or what we want this endpoint to do, is to return all of the stories saved in the database. So does anyone have any idea how we would do this? How can we get all of these stories in the database inside this get story, right? Ideas? Any Mongoose commands? Okay, well, so what we're actually going to do is to use the story model, right? Because we want to get stories, we want to get things from the stories collection, because all of our stories should technically be in the stories collection. And to interact with our stories collection, we use the story model, right? And to find data in MongoDB, we want to use the .find method. So let's go to router.get/stories. Again, this, whatever is in this body of code, this is what the server will do to whenever the client or the front end calls a get request, makes a get request to the /API/stories endpoint. But like this is what the server does to get all of the data that the front end has requested, and in this case, we've defined it to get all of the stories. And to do that, we do story, so story .find, right? And this is basically saying that we want to find something inside the story collection, and this .find method takes in one parameter, and it is a JavaScript object. And this JavaScript object, or we can specify what kinds of filters we want to impose on the stories that we find, right? Maybe we want to store all stories by like say like hello, or all stories by like Papa Shop, or we want to find like all stories with maybe the content on the graph. But in our case, since our get requested API to the /story endpoint wants to return all of the stories, we don't need any filters, right? So in that case, we want to get everything from a given function, And we don't have any filters, therefore we just leave this empty. Right? Okay. And then stories.find should return like a list of all of the stories that are found from the stories collection. And we want to return the result of what is being returned to us by the database. So we can't do like say something like cont stories equals to story.find and then res.send stories. This is not correct, right? Because again, JavaScript is an asynchronous language. So it's possible for the server to send or to execute line 24 to send back stories without actually like this finishing, right? Without fully finding all of these stories from the database. And we don't want that to happen. We want it to be such that we only send a response to our front end when we finish finding all of our stories. And to guarantee that, we use again the .then statement, the .then clause, where we're saying that only after we find all of our stories, after we do that, we execute this function inside. Right, this is what we call a callback function, and this callback function takes in as input whatever is returned by the .story.find. In this case, it is a list of stories, and we then send this list of stories back to the front end. Right. So again, to recap, first we found all of these stories by running the .find method on the stories model, right? So we did story.find, right? And we wanted to find all of the stories, so there's no need to put any filters in. So we just left the JavaScript object as blank. And then only after we found all of these stories do we send these stories or these whatever we get from the database back to our front end. Right. Yes, yes. Okay. Cool. So that was get. Now what we want to do is, okay. Okay, yes, again, this is our code. We want to first find all of our stories using the empty selectors, meaning that we get all of the documents. So whenever you get all of the documents in a collection, you use the like empty selector. And then only after we found all of the stories, do we send a response back to our front end. So now let's actually implement post request. So let's implement post/story, right? Let's implement what we want to do when the front end calls makes a post request to the /stories endpoint. And in this case, what we want to do is to create a new story based on the content parameter given in the request. We want to create a stories document inside our stories collection, right? But where do we get the content that is passed into us from the front end? Well, it turns out that when you pass information from the front end to the back end, the information is located in different places depending on the type of request that the front end sends to the back end. So in the case of a GET request, all of the parameters, all of the information that the front end sends to the back end will be located in an object called rec.query. And so if the front end sends like the back end a field called content in a GET request, we get that field, that value, by doing rec.query.content. But in the case of a post request, all of the data that front end sends to the back end is located in the object of rec.body. So if you want to access the field, the content field, when the front end makes a post request to the back end, you want to do rec.body.content. So always remember for GET requests, you get the information from rec.query, and for post requests, you use rec.body. Right, and so now let's implement the post request endpoint for the /stories. Okay, and so the first thing we have to do is to create a new story document. We want to put the story document into MongoDB, right? So how to create add something to MongoDB database, we need to first create an object that represents a document, a story document. So let's call it cont new story. And to create a new story document, we do use the new and it's a new story. And inside we pass in as input the object that represents the document that we want to add. Right. So this document, as a reminder, it should follow the schema that the story schema that we defined in our story.js file. Right. It should follow this exactly with creator name and content. No more, no less fields, right? And all the fields must have the correct type. So let's do that. So we want to have a creator, and we want to, and this is a string, and we want to have content, which is a string, right? So what should we put as the creator name? Well, for now, since we haven't really talked about auth, we'll be talking about it right after this workshop. We don't actually have users in Capable. So for now, we can just like set it to any like dummy string. We can set it to like your own name. Or we also have like a dummy variable, I believe, somewhere. Oh, I guess we don't. So just set it to your name. Right, so it's just any string. So what do we want to pass in as the content? Right, we want to upload a document that contains the content that the front end sent us, and the front end sent us a object with a field of content, right? And to get content the value of content from whatever information the front end sent us, we use ref.body, and since whatever the thing that and sent us is called content, we use content, right? This is dot content, not because this field is content, but because when the front end sent us a request, it put the content of the story in a field called content, right? Like when we made a post request in the front end, so on front end, we did something like post, do like the API/story. And we like inputted an object called content, and like it contained like hello new story, right? So because this field is called content, like the field that the front end send us is called content, we use dot content, not because this is content, right? So the front end sent us a field called like story. Content to access this story content, we need to put story content. Right? So this is ref.body dot whatever field we want to get from whatever the front end sent us, not whatever like is in the schema. Right? So just to clear up that confusion. So right now this is what front end sent us. Okay. Yes. Okay. So now we have created our new story document, but it's just like a document format. We haven't set it up to the DB database. To do that, we need to call the dot save method. So the new story dot save, right? And optionally, after you save it, you can then like send it back to the client. Because it turns out that for Mongoose, the dot save method returns the Mongo document that you just created. So what you can do is to send it back to the client, but you don't really need to do that. So this part is completely optional. Like you could just end it like here if you want. Or sometimes you can also log it if you want. So you can do whatever you want in this .then block. Yeah. Okay. So just to recap, for the post/story endpoint, what we did was we applied code that allowed us to handle the information that the front end sent us. In this case, the front end sent us the content of the new post that we want to add to our feed. To do that, we created a new story object, and we saved that document, which basically means that we put that document into a database on the cloud or MongoDB, right? So, in general, when you want to something to your MongoDB database, there's only two things you need to do. You want to create object that represents your topic. So those are the two steps. And going back to the get request, again, we found all of the stories that we want to find, and then after we finish finding all of them, do we send it back to the front end? Right. And so again, here is the solution for the post life story endpoint, right? So we created a new story document, and then we uploaded that document onto Atlas, basically, as part of the .save. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or put it on the question stop or put yourself on the queue. And to catch up, then get reset --hard and check out workshop 6 step 2. And again, if you have your own SRV, do please copy it into server.js. Okay, so now it's going to be your guys' turn to implement both the get comment and the post comment, right? We're going to take it step by step. Let's do the get/comment endpoint first. So when we go back into API.js, you'll notice that most of the code is actually already there for us, right? Like if we look at what we have in the get stories endpoint, basically it looks like the same thing. Now, the only thing that's different is you have to figure out what you want to do to actually get, like, you know, the comments that you want, right? So for the get/comment endpoint, the intended behavior is to get all comments that belong to a single post. Now, so that means that you can't just do, like, you can't just find and return all comments. That's not right, right? But you want all comments under a specific post. But if you just do comment.find with an empty like search, you'll return all of the comments in your comments collection. So this means that you have to filter your database to find all of the comments that belong to the post that the front end has requested. So you want to add something in this JavaScript object to specify that. And remember, the schema for our comments model is the create parent and the content. And this parent is basically the identifier of the story that the comment belongs to. So you probably want to filter on this parent field, right? And as a reminder, the comment API gets in as an input from the front end, the ID of the parent, right? And so maybe you can use both of those things to perhaps find the comments that you are looking for. And as a reminder, this is passed in from the front end on the front end side. This is it's called the get API /API/comment, and they pass in what is called a parent field. And maybe this is like story 1 or something, I don't know. Right. So try to do what try to figure out what should go inside of this filter, right? How can you filter the comments such that you only find comments that belong to the specified parent? And also do it, remind yourself that this is a get request. So the way you get data that's passed in from the front end from the get request is different than how you get data that's passed in from a post request. right? Data passed in from a GET request is in rec.query, while data passed in from a post request is in rec.body. Okay, raise your hand if you guys got it. Thumbs up, down. Okay, a few more minutes. Okay. Okay. Show of hands. So ready? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, cool. Okay, let's go through this together. So again, remember for our get slash comment endpoint, our intended behavior is to get all of the comments that belong to a particular post, a particular quote parent, right? So we want to find all of the comments that belong to that specific parent, and to do that, we want to filter all of the comments in our database for only the comments that belong to the parent, right? And it turns out that if we look into the comment schema, the parent or the post, right, that the comment belongs to is specified by this parent field. So that means that we want to filter inside this find filter, where we want to filter by is the field parent. And the value that we want to filter by is the value that is passed into us from the front end, right? Because the front end is telling us when the call this request, hey, get rid of all of the comments that belong to this specific parent. So we have to filter by that specific parent that the front end gives us, right? And to access that value, it turns out that the front end passed that value to us in what is called what's in the parent field. Right? And to access that parent field that's sent to us by the front end, we need to do rec.query, since this is a get request, dot parent. right? If the front end, for example, pass in to us the parent and pump instead as that maybe story, then instead of rec.query.parent, we must do rec.query.story, right? But this, whatever it is after the dot query, that's the name of the field that the front end passes into us, right? Like it's not the name of the thing we want to filter. It just happened to be coincidentally that they are the same in our example. But this field after the dot query should be the field of the field passed into us from the front end. This field that we want to actually filter on is the find that the schema is. And so this is just our filter, right? So we have to find all fields. Then the parent is the like story that the front end sent to us. Okay, so that was get/comment. Now let's go on to post comment. Yeah. Again, this is the solution for the get comment. We are finding all comments that belong to a given parent specified by the front end, where the front end is telling us, hey, I want all stories that belong to this specific post that I've specified in this parent field. And we access it using the rec.query, right? We access this parent field that the front end passes in rec.query. Once we found all of the comments that belong to a specific post, we then return those comments to the front end. Okay, so now let's look at and implement the post comment method, post comment endpoint. And so essentially what we have to do in this endpoint, we have to save a new comment in the database with both the parent and the content from the request. Remember, when the front end gives us a post request, or when the front end sends us a post request to the /comment endpoint, from the front end side, it's doing something like post /API/comment, like content and something, and then parent something, like story one content is or something. Okay, right, and so essentially we want to follow the same steps that we did in the post request. How we handle the post request to the story endpoint, we want to first create a document that represents what we want to put into our comments collection. So you can imagine like initializing any new comments. And so you have the document that you want to put in. And then after that is pretty standard. You just want to save whatever document you created. And optionally like send it back to the client or log it or whatever. Right. So it's going to be different between the client post comment endpoint and the post story endpoint is how you create what you put inside of here, and what model you use, and like yeah, that's basically the difference. Right. So the first thing you want to do is step one, create a new comment instance. Right, and then step two, you want to save the comment instance to upload it, basically to upload the MongoDB. Right, and you want to populate this new comment instance with values that the front end sent in, right? Front end sent. And again, to access the values that the front end sends, since this is a post request, you want to use the rec.body, right? So I'll give you guys a few minutes. So definitely look at the story, post story endpoint, right? Questions? No. As always, if you need help, please put yourself on the queue, and maybe like put down any questions on the questions box. right? So let's go back to the post story, right? So you want to do something very, very similar to what we did in post story. Okay, for the sake of time, since we're kind of running quite over, let's just go over the post comments together, right, step by step. So basically, the first thing we want to do is to create a new comment instance, right? And so to do that, we want to do const new comment equals to new comment model. And whatever we want to put inside our new document, right? And again, if we go back to our comment schema, remember we have 3 fields that we must input. It must be a parent and content, right? So they're all string, creator name, and again, since we do not have users out of that, you can just put anything you want in the creator name. Let's just say I will put hello in this, right? And remember, the parent and the content are things that the front end specify or give to us, right? Right? The front end is telling us for the newly created comment what is the parent post that it belongs to and what the content of the comment is. So we want to take the information that the front end gave us in the post request and put it in our new comment to create a new comment in the database, right? And to access these fields, again, we use the rec.body, rec.body, right? And since the front end called it parent, we do rec.body.parent, and for content, similarly, we do rec.body.content. So always remember, when you're getting data from a post request, from the front end in a post request, you want to use rec.body. But when you're getting data from the front end in a post request, you use rec.query. Okay. Now we've created a document that represents our a comment document in Mongoose. And the next thing we have to do in step number 2 is to save the comment instance, right? And all we need to do for that is to take what we just created, new comments, and we say call these .save method. And that will basically just upload this new comment that we created onto MongoDB. And optionally, you can do a .then and you can like send it to the front end. That's not the same. Right, this is very obvious. But the important part is to create a new comment. What we did was we created a new comment document like object inside of our endpoint first, right? And we defined what the values are for the new document that we want to add. in this case, for two of the fields, we got the values from the front end. The front end told us, like, add a new comment with the values inside, right? That's what I want to add to the database. And for that, we made a dummy creator name value. And after we created the document or the document object, we have to actually save it and put it in our MongoDB database on the cloud by our.save. So again, what we did was we created a new comment, or like an object that looks like a new comment document. It if it doesn't schema, it's not going to add. So make sure it must follow the schema. We save the comment to basically upload it onto our database. And so if we test by running npm start, npm run hot, post the story, post the comment, you should actually see it in your database if you actually like use your own SRV. If you use Capbook's SRV, that would provide it. Unfortunately, you won't be able to like, see it. But let's say 1, 2, 3. Let's submit. Right. And we got that. And let's say we submit comment 1, 2, 3. And if we look inside the database, it should be there. But one important thing to kind of notice is that in this workshop, we didn't do anything on the front end. Right? Like we didn't change the get request or the post request on the front end side. All we did is we changed like the code, how the handle those API endpoints. So this kind of makes the point that you can think of the endpoints of the backend or like the API endpoints provided by the backend as like black box functions. Right? The front end knows this is what I'm going to put in as an input. This is what I'm going to put in as an output. Get as an output, right? However the back end like handles that get request, that's up to the back end, right? That's all defined inside the back end. How the back end gets the information that the front end requested, or like handles the information that the front end gave to it. These are all done by the back end. We didn't change the front end at all, right? So once again, API endpoints are just like functions on the back end side, and to the front end is just like a black box function where it knows here are my inputs that I'm supposed to give and the outputs I'm supposed to get from calling this API, right? We didn't change anything on the front end side. And if we go into collections, hopefully we'll see comments. Let's see. Yes, so we do see comment 1, 2, 3 that I made earlier. And likewise, if we go into stories, you can also like filter by your documents on Atlas. And so you can see here that it worked. So that's it for the database workshop. Next up, we have Josh, who will be talking about authentication.